Hello there, it's Chris P. Williams here from Fried Egg Studios. I hope you're well. Today's tutorial is very much a basic beginner's guide to Affinity Photo and is designed just to get you up and running editing photographs as quickly as possible. Okay, let's start with importing some images to work on. To do that, we click on File in the top left corner and then we click on Open, and we can select the images we want to work on. If you only wanted to work on one image, then you just click on it and press open, or you can double click it and it will open automatically into Affinity Photo. But in this case I want to work on two images, and to do this you basically press Ctrl or Command on a Mac and click a second image, and you can also go along and select third, fourth, fifth image depending on how many images you wanted to work on, but in this case we only want to work on these two. So once you're happy, we can just click on Open, and you can see now both images are brought into our Affinity workspace, and they're both brought in on separate workspaces. We're going to look at this pigeon first of all, just to demonstrate some of the tools within Affinity Photo. Now first of all, a quick tip: if you've got a scroll wheel on your mouse, I strongly recommend that you go to Edit, Preference, Tools, and then make sure that this box is checked, Use Mouse Wheel to Zoom, because what that will allow you to do is zoom in quite freely just by scrolling your mouse wheel, and that will be invaluable later on as you get into Affinity Photo. So just a quick tip there for you. Right, another important tool, if I scroll in on this bird, we can see here we've had the hand tool. Now a shortcut for the hand tool is H, but also if you press the space bar it will have the same effect of turning on the hand tool. And what that does is it's like grabbing the image and you can just drag it around. Now whilst you're doing that, if you look down in the bottom right hand corner, if you see this palette called Navigator, make sure that's highlighted and you get this overall view of your image, and as you drag around you can see that the little box moves to indicate where you are in your particular image. Okay, I'm just going to scroll out now by using my scroll wheel, and you can see there what's happened now is the image is no longer center. Now I could press my space bar, drag it down and roughly center it, but what I'll do, I'll put it back and just show you a quick shortcut. If you press Control and 0 or Command and 0 on a Mac, the image gets centered automatically for you. So again, another useful little tip there. So using the hand tool and the zoom tool, you can see how you can easily navigate around your image. Right, we're now going to look at adjustments within Affinity Photo, and we're going to look at layers within Affinity Photo. If you go over here to the right, we find our palettes, and I'm just going to click on the layers palette for now, and we can see here that our background layer has been highlighted, and we can actually rename that if you wish just by clicking on the text and typing in a new heading, but we'll keep it as background for now. If we look first at this background layer, I want to do something with this image just to make it pop a little bit more. And normally what you do to increase contrast, for instance, is I'd add what's called a curve adjustment. Again, I won't go into too much detail with regards to curve adjustments, but basically if you come down to the bottom of that layers palette and you can see this little white and black circle, if I click on that you get a few choices. So you can see here we've got levels, white balance, hue, saturation, luminance, black and white, and what I'm looking for is this one, curves. So I'm just going to add a little bit of pop to this image. You can see there I've just done a slight shallow S curve, and once I'm happy with the adjustment I've made, I can just press a little cross and I've committed to that adjustment. This process is called non-destructive editing, and the reason being is I haven't affected the actual background layer. All I've done is introduced a new layer with the adjustment that I want to make. So you can see as I turn this layer on and off by ticking and unchecking the checkbox, you can see the effect, and the image beneath is untouched. So that is non-destructive editing. And this adjustment layer that I've inserted is affecting every layer beneath it. Okay, let's go back to our bird. I'm going to get rid of this adjustment layer, and to do this I can highlight it and press delete, or I can highlight it and click on this little bin icon which says remove layer. So we can press on that and it's disappeared, and we're back to where we started. I'm going to show you another tool now, and it's here. It's called the selection brush tool, and the shortcut for that is W. And the selection brush tool is very useful for selecting parts of an image. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to increase my brush size, and you do this by pressing the right square bracket. And I'm going to roughly select this pigeon. I'm going to decrease my brush size using the left square bracket just to get these finer points. And you can see here the selection brush mode is on add. So if you click and let go and then add to the image as you see fit, it gradually builds up the selection for you. So I'm just going to get these feathers here, and I get these feathers here. If I zoom in and reduce my brush size, I can get these finer details. And like I said, this is just a rough guide today, so I'm not going to worry too much about the selection itself or the accuracy of a selection. And again, center the image by pressing Ctrl and 0. Let's zoom in on the beak. And this, again, all I'm doing is I'm clicking with my selection brush. Now another useful tip here, you can see here it's selected some of the water by mistake. Now instead of having to go to subtract up here, I can keep it in add mode and just press the Alt key on the keyboard and stroke over that area and it disappears. And here again we want to add that little bit on the pigeon's neck. Again, letting go of the Alt key this time and just reselecting the new area. And similarly along the back of the pigeon's neck. And if I zoom out, we're just left with a few feathers, a few straggling feathers. If you make a mistake like that, all you've got to do is press Ctrl and Z and it goes back to the last step. I'll just get this last bit of feather, and I think that's good enough for today's exercise. Let's zoom out, Ctrl and 0 to center the image, and you can see there now we've now selected our pigeon using the selection brush tool. We can now make a decision as to whether or not we want to copy that pigeon, i.e. cut him out, or do we want to make an adjustment to our pigeon. I'll demonstrate the adjustment first of all, and you can see now, because we've used the selection tool, what's going to happen, any adjustment we make is only going to affect the area within these marching ants, as we call them. If we wanted to affect the water instead of the pigeon, then that's simply a case of going to our invert selection button at the top of the screen, or the shortcut for this is Shift Control and I, or Shift Command and I on a Mac. So if we click on that, you can see now our selection now has marching ants around our water, marching ants around our bird, and what that means is the area between these is now selected, but that's not what I really wanted, so I'm going to revert back now to our original selection. That is the pigeon. Right, now before I do anything to this, what I want to do is I want to soften the selection, because if I didn't and I started working on this image, any adjustment I made or any copying I did would have rough, jagged edges. And that's not really what we want. So what you can do to eradicate this is go to select, go down to feather, and then select a figure. Usually around 4 pixels will do the job. So just type in 4 and press apply. And all this does then is soften this selection for me. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go to my adjustment layer and I'm going to turn this bird black and white. So to turn it black and white, I just click on that layer and you can see the pigeon has automatically turned black and white, and our adjustments palette has automatically appeared within Affinity Photo. And you can also see that it's only affecting the pigeon. Okay, so we'll say we're happy. Once we're happy with the adjustment, we can just click on the cross to commit. And now if we go back to our layers palette, you can see now we have a new layer. And this layer is separate from our original background. And this is what non-destructive editing means. And this is what the layers palette allows us to do, is that we can edit images non-destructively. If I was, for instance, to turn this layer off by clicking on the checkbox, you can see the pigeon is still actually its correct color underneath. We haven't altered that in any way, we've only altered the adjustment layer. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll turn that layer off now, and I'll press Ctrl and D, and we'll go back to our image, and I'll just press Ctrl and 0 to center our image. And now if we decided later on, oh, I wish I hadn't deselected that pigeon because it was quite a job to select it, a quick way of getting that selection back is we can go back to our adjustment palette and we can press Control or Command on a Mac. So we can press Control and click. Now we've got our selection back, but we're still on the black and white adjustment layer. And if we were going to copy that layer, we wouldn't be copying any actual pixels because we'll only be copying an effect. So what you need to ensure is you've got your background layer selected. And we're going to press Control and C, and we're going to go to our second image, and I'm going to press Control and V, and there we have our pigeon. So I'm going to return to our original image. You can see there our selection and our second image. Now we've got the bird in situ. Now you can see it's bounded now by this blue box, and that the Move tool is highlighted, and to access the Move tool the shortcut is V. And all this means is, whilst that bounding box is visible, we can move the bird where we see fit. We can also resize the bird by dragging in the corners, or we can squash the bird by dragging up and down on the top and bottom bars, or we can make the bird thinner. But what I'll do is I'll press Ctrl and Z to undo, just to return back to our original state. And now I'm going to zoom in slightly on this image. Press the space bar to drag. I can see the contrast of this bird and the sharpness. It makes it stand out a little bit too much. So what we need to do is we just need to soften that by blurring our bird image, just to make it blend in with our background. And to do this, you can make sure that your bird layer is selected, and we're going to go to Layer, and we're going to go to New Live Filter Layer, and we're going to go to this Gaussian Blur filter, and we're going to click on that, and then we get this Gaussian Blur dialog box. And all you need to do is slide this slightly to the right. If you slide it too much, obviously our bird gets ultra blurry and is totally out of focus, which might be the effect you're after, but in this case we're not. We just want to soften it slightly just to blend it in, and there you go. We've blended it in a little bit better. And once you're happy with the adjustment, again, you just press Commit. Now, because we used a layer adjustment, if you look in our layers palette, we now have a little drop down arrow. So if we click on that, we can see our Gaussian blur adjustment is there, so that we can return to that at any stage, and we can make another adjustment. So if, for instance, I zoom in here and I think, oh, it's a little bit too blurry for my taste, I can double click and our dialog box with the Gaussian blur reappears, and I can drop the amount of blur, and again just press across to commit, and then we can recollapse that box. So you can see that again is the power of non-destructive editing. Even edits such as blurs are only temporary and can be removed or adjusted at any time. So I'm just going to press Ctrl and 0 now to center our image again. And to demonstrate the non-destructive nature again of layers, I'm just going to turn this layer off, and you can see that's our original background, and the bird has disappeared, and I'll turn it back on and the bird has come back. Now if, for instance, I wanted to have more birds in the image, I could click on that layer and I could press Ctrl and J or Command and J on a Mac, and you can see I've got another layer. Now you think, oh, I've got two layers with two birds, but I can only see one bird. And that's because Affinity Photo will paste the image immediately behind the existing layer. So if we go to our Move tool, make sure our Move tool is selected, and we can move that bird, and you can see we now have two birds. So what I'll do is I'll put one here, and I'll decrease the size, and we can go to our Gaussian blur layer on that layer we just duplicated, because when you press Ctrl and J, you actually duplicate the layer, and all of the effects that you created or attributed to that layer. So if we double click our Gaussian blur layer for that bird, we can now increase that and blur it, because see, it is slightly further back in the background, and we can commit, and if I zoom in you can see the effect we've had. That bird is now slightly more blurred than the bird in front. Okay, I'm just going to press Ctrl and 0 to center our image. So just to reiterate, when you copy from an image, as we did with this pigeon, and paste onto a second image, the image is pasted onto its own layer, so it does not affect the layer beneath. And you can duplicate layers, and you can also duplicate any effects attributed to those layers just by highlighting the layer and pressing Command and J. Now, because these layers are non-destructive, I can now go back to my background layer and I can make another selection. I'm going to go back to my selection tool, which is a W shortcut. I'm going to increase my brush size again using the right square bracket. I'm just going to select this tree. You can see there it's gone a little bit too much, so I'm going to press Alt and I'm going to deselect. Again, I'm not going to worry too much about the accuracy of a selection because it's only to demonstrate the basics of Affinity Photo. I'll deselect that little tree there in front. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and change the colour of this tree just to make it a little bit more interesting. Now, there are two ways you can do this. If we go to our adjustments palette, you can go to recolor, or you can go to hue, saturation and luminance. Both of them have a similar effect. I prefer hue, saturation and luminance, so I'm going to click on that. Now, if I'm going to colour an object, I need to go to my blend mode, scroll down and then select colour. And this is just telling Affinity Photo that the HSL adjustment is going to affect the colour of the image beneath, which is my background layer. And now I can just move this slider and you can see I'm changing the colour of that tree. And I think this sort of purple lavender kind of look sort of suits the image, and I'm going to press the cross to commit, and then I'm going to press Ctrl and D to deselect. You can see we've altered the tree's colour. You can also see here that we've overlapped the tree in front, and that's not really what I wanted to do. So what I can do now is I can mask this area out. And the beauty of adjustment layers in Affinity Photo is when they're created, they're also created automatically with a layer mask. And what that means is if I highlight the adjustment layer, and I go to my brushes tool, which is here, I go to my paintbrush tool, I make sure black is selected. If black isn't selected, you can press the X on your keyboard, and that switches between the front colour and the background colour. So it's a foreground colour and background colour. So you can see it's now background colour, which is white, and pressing X, it's now the foreground colour, which is black. And double clicking on the black tab there, you can see it brings up the color chooser, so you can allocate whatever color you want to the foreground or background color. But when you're working in masks, you only usually work in black and white or shades of gray. But again, we're not going to dwell too much on that. So I've got my black paintbrush selected, and you can see when I hover over the image, because I'm painting on a mask in black, I reveal the color underneath. Now, it's not a new color, it's just a color from the background. That's now showing through because I painted black. Black basically means hide the effect, and white means reveal. So if you wanted to hide the effect, i.e. the purple adjustment, you paint black to hide it. And now if I press the X key, you can see the colours have changed now. I'm now using my background colour, which is white. And if I paint over the area I just painted, the purple comes back because I'm now revealing that effect. So I'll press X to go back to black, and I'll hide the effect. Now if I zoom out, Control and 0, I can see I've softened that error, and I'm going to just zoom in slightly again. I can still see certain areas here where the purple is showing through. And if I press Control and 0 or Command and 0 on a Mac, zoom out, you can see the effect we've had. And again, even this, although it looks like we've destroyed our original background layer, if we go to our little checkbox, turn it on and turn it off, we can see the effect is non-destructive, and we can go back to it as we see fit. Now, another thing we can do with adjustment layers is we can go to the opacity drop down, and we can reduce the amount of effect. So if we thought that was too much in your face with regards to the lavender, we can adjust it accordingly. And I think that looks a little bit more natural. and I'll commit to that just by clicking back on my layer. You can see we've reduced the opacity to 79% and it just sits a little bit better in the image. Likewise, if for whatever reason we wanted to make the visibility of the bird slightly less, we can fade that bird accordingly just by using the opacity slider. Okay, so that's a few basic edits within Affinity Photo. I've shown you how to open and import images and how to cut and paste between images and make a few adjustments using Layers palette and the adjustment layers. All that's left now is to show you how to export this image and to save it. Right, if you want to save this project, you simply go to File and Save or Save As. Now if you go to Save As, you can see down here it defaults to the Affinity Photo extension, which is .af photo, and then you just press Save, and that is basically going to save that project. It's not going to save it as a JPEG. Now if you do want to save it as a JPEG so that you can share it on Facebook and Instagram and the like, you just go to File and you go to Export, and it defaults to the most common format, which is JPEG, because JPEG is probably the most accepted format on multiple platforms and also in photo labs. So you just make sure that you've got your quality settings set the way you want. In this case we're going to go for best quality, and we can see that the image size is as per the original. Again, you can reduce that size if you see fit, and once you're happy then you can just click on Export. If you wanted to save it as a PNG file or a GIF or a PSD, then you just click on the appropriate tab. But we'll stick with JPEG, and we'll go to Export, and then you can select the folder where you want to save your image. So I'll put it back in my Barcelona JPEGs, and you can see the file name is defaulted to the existing file name. You can call this whatever you want. What I'll do is I'll call this Purple Tree, and I'll press Save, and that's it. I've exported my image now as a JPEG. And that's the end of today's tutorial. Like I said, it is very, very basic. It's just to get you up and running, give you a few pointers and a few ideas and a few tips. I'll be doing another beginner's video a little bit later on, so stay tuned and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thanks for watching.